Welcome to GCA Unmuted, the podcast where we share the stories and strategies that show how Georgia Cyber Academy makes online learning work. At GCA, support doesn't start when a student falls behind. It starts with the system. Through MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support, we meet students where they are, academically, behaviorally, and socially, and help them move forward. I'm joined by Aimee Purser, MTSS supervisor at GCA. She helps oversee the layered support system that keeps students growing, teachers informed, and interventions aligned across our school. We'll break down what MTSS looks like in a virtual school, how GCA supports students through academic and behavioral tiers, and what it takes to create a responsive, data-driven culture of care. So, Aimee, thanks for joining us. Can you first share a story or example where MTSS made a clear impact on a student's academic or behavioral progress?
Yeah, it is so hard to pick just one story because I feel like we're doing this every day with our students. But I have had the pleasure to be an AIM Tier 2 teacher, a Tier 3 intervention specialist, a student support team coordinator, and now this multi-tiered system of support supervisor. So when I think about MTSS making an impact for students, I go back to myself as a Tier 3 intervention specialist. I had this student who was really strong in reading, but not strong in math. And so I spent a lot of my time thinking, I've got to get him over this hump. I've got to make sure he achieves everything. And so I took it on myself, created these like awesome, trying to create great lessons that engaged him, like an Avengers lesson where we were creating like getting the stones, but they weren't like reality or time. They were the decimal stone and the ratio stone. So I like took
Nice.
it on myself. But then as I have grown through each of those positions, I realized I was sort of wrong because MTSS has an impact when we're all at the table. So it does include the parents and the student support team coordinators and everybody that has these touch points. And so what was really cool about that student is I was able to see through each of those positions how we were able to qualify him for additional support that he needed. And it wasn't just a sole what I did type deal. It was having everyone at the table to look at data, to help me make decisions, to see where I was doing good, where the student was doing good. So I think that those are the most impactful MTSS stories is when we think of it as a shared experience between parents, students, and our team of teachers.
That makes sense. What do you think with that student in particular? What were some early signs that you were like, hey, some extra support's needed here with this student? Were there any, or what'd you pick up on?
Yes, so our team does frequent, we do data dives. And so it became evident with that student when we saw how strong he was in reading, but these deficits in math kept occurring. So because of these weird trends, it seemed that there might be something there that wasn't just, yeah, I just don't like math or I'm just not turning in assignments. It became a, oh man, this kid is giving everything he has and is still not able to achieve what he needs. And so that's sort of where multi-tiered support MTSS like thrives is okay, how can I prove the deficit and help you understand that this is not a weakness or anything. This is just you need more support in this area.
Sure, yeah. And with that student, what interventions do you recall were used, and then how did they help that student? Do you remember?
Yeah, so we use and we have for a few years the intervention program iReady. So he was constantly working independently in that program, so we were able to see how he could operate independent work if he was able to pass those, without my assistance. With my assistance, I was using guided practice, different ways, manipulatives, things that maybe could help things sink in, make it more concrete for him. And so having those two things together, we were able to make a decision of, oh, yeah, the interventions are there, but we're not seeing the rate of increase or the progress that we need to see.
Sure. Did that student, do you recall, ultimately find success in the MTSS program with math? Did they achieve? Do you
And
recall?
we were able to get them additional support, and that's what's so great is that we were able to use tier 3 to say, oh, you might need these special education services that provide more intense help in your core classes and everything. So our interventions were able to sort of lead to that decision, which is a huge win because we're able to support that student how they need to be supported.
Sure. And I imagine this process to kind of uh, you're trying to show evidence for needing additional support, additional support, additional support. But for listeners who aren't familiar with what even is MTSS, I don't even know what it stands for, right? Can you describe it for us in a nutshell?
Yeah, so multi-tiered system of support. One acronym or one sort of image that we always use is like ice cream scoops. So like every student is holding their cone and they have that tier one support. So every student receives that core content instruction. And then students that maybe don't thrive in those environments, or we continue to see maybe they're falling further and further behind, we can add an additional scoop onto that tier two support. And tier two support is going to be really focused on setting up the student for like prerequisite skills, things that maybe they need to know in order to be successful in that tier one classroom. And so we're hoping when we put those interventions in place that it's like, yes, everything is making sense. But if for some reason it's not, we can always layer more on. And that's where that third scoop comes in of tier three support. And that is intense, targeted, one-to-one. It's where we are trying our best to build those foundational skills. So if we build the foundational and then you can work with the prerequisite and then you're successful in your core content, that means our interventions are sort of working and we can start peeling back and fading. If for some reason all those supports are in place and we're still not seeing a ton of progress, that is where we merge with our special education department to see if the student could possibly benefit from more permanent support in those areas.
Oh, I see. So MTSS could almost be this like bridge or this ramp to is there no such thing as level four? Like level three is when MTSS is done and then like they could transition to special education. Is that sort of
Yeah,
what happens? Okay.
that would sort of be your level four is okay, we've
Okay.
tried all these things and we want to make sure you're in an environment where you can thrive. And all of these things that we're trying could be in that environment with a certified special education teacher. So
Sure.
that is sort of where it leads to.
Now I just want ice cream,
No,
Amy.
no, I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
like the best. It's the best visual.
Mhm. Yes. So when you think about how MTSS is structured at GCA, how would you describe kind of the landscape of MTSS at GCA, and how do we kind of merge or support the academic and behavioral together, or do they not? Is the academic support totally separate from a behavioral support? Are they those independent? Do they work together? Just kind of describe the landscape of MTSS at GCA, and then also what did the academic and behavioral supports look like, and do they work together?
Absolutely. Well, like tiered, it looks different across the grade band. So I'll try to like do a broad overview with some little zooming in a bit. But that core instruction, that's tier one. So that's what our grade bands are boldly leading for us. So we appreciate their partnership. And then that tier two, once students are elevated to tier two, that's sort of where they come into our world. So at the primary and elementary grade band, we are using an innovative early intervention program model. So our teachers are actually going into content classes and supporting during that core instruction time. And then those content teachers are coming to us. So it's really cool. We have like a really good collaboration in those areas where we're focusing on small groups and, like I said, those prerequisite skills. As students move to middle school and high school, it gets a little more subject specific. So we're able to really target, is this a reading need? Is it a math? Sometimes it's both, and that is a-okay. So that's our tier two. And then tier three is going to take it even deeper. In the primary elementary, that whole field, we do a little bit of push in and pull out. So that's where we're working with students one to one. And then the same thing in the middle grades. We're working with students one to one, building that foundational knowledge so they feel super confident. And to your point about academics and behavior, it's really cool because our team gets to like supervise academic intervention specialists and behavior intervention specialists. So we're able to sort of see if those two things connect. Sometimes is the behavior that might be negative may be because the student is really behind, and so that tells us, okay, let's put behavior in place. Let's also put some academic support. And then it can go the other way if a student is maybe just has behavior that's not supportive in their learning environment, but we know they can achieve, we can just keep that behavior support in place. So it helps us to be able to say, does this thing impact this thing, and vice versa. So it's really cool that we get to see them work together in tandem.
I see. So when A student is moving through the tiers. How do y'all decide? Like, this student is in tier one, right? So you're saying everybody at GCA is at tier one. But when they go from tier one to tier two, how do y'all decide, okay, this student actually needs to go to tier two, and then they're in tier two, this student needs to go to tier three? How do y'all decide when and how a student moves between these tiers? And can a student ever move down? Like, do they go from three to two and then back to one? Do you ever see that happen? And what sort of data are y'all using to support any of this stuff?
Absolutely. So we're definitely using data. We have an MTSS qualification criteria. So at the beginning of the year, we're looking at students who need to be in our program. And then throughout the year, we're still using that qualification criteria. So that criteria is local assessments, state assessments, grades, how they do on universal screeners. And then we also look at anecdotal data too. So teacher feedback, feedback from other GCA stakeholders who maybe have touch points with a student, like a 504 coordinator or a counselor or an ESOL teacher or supervisor. So we're able to use all of that to make a decision. And we have a really cool process. We have an inquiry specialist who is able to sort of gather those from teachers and other people who are referring students for support. Our instructional support services assistant principals do a great job of determining if a student needs support, if they meet that criteria. And then I wanted teachers to sort of have their own little way to see if students qualify. So I created Mia, the MTSS chatbot. And so what she will do for teachers is they can log in, they can give certain data points and see if a student qualifies before they refer them for our services. So that's just an extra little thing I wanted teachers to have in their back pocket so that they could say, I'm seeing this, but does it really lead to additional support or should I hold on for a second? So that's really exciting. And like you said, they can go, students can we can fade support. So students can go back through the tiers as well. If a student's responding to tier three, we can peel back to tier two and then peel back to tier one as well. Our team, once they come to us, like I said, we do those data dives. So we are looking really closely at how students are progressing with the current interventions. And so if they're progressing well, we may say, okay, let's just chat with the student and make sure we're still achieving our goals. If they're not doing so well, that's when we talk about additionally adding tier three support or even more. So yeah, that's how we sort of move them through the tiers.
Do we even see that much, Amy? Like, do we even see the peeling back, is it even common for students to come down once they're moving up, or is it usually they are in a tier and they stay there?
It's really common that they move. So that's exciting too. We do exits in our program. So that's like this great time for you to celebrate with a student that like you caught up, you got to where you needed to be and you no longer need this additional support. So that's always fun being able to peel that support back for students and give them a little time back on their schedule. So it is more common. We obviously want it to be more common sometimes,
Mhm.
but we're happy that either path these students end up going down, it's the support that they need. So
Mhm.
happy to peel it back or happy to increase it, depending on what they need.
Sure. And you mentioned before you have academic interventionists and behavioral interventionists. We have both roles at GCA, and those they serve separately but also collaborate. Can you tell me a little bit about like how those two roles, those two staff at GCA collaborate within this MTSS framework? And do those interventionists, do they collaborate with the teachers? And if they do, how so? And is there an MTSS specific teacher, or is it MTSS interventionists like academic, and they come alongside the GCA content teachers? How does that work, and how does that collaboration work?
Yes, that is exactly it. So our team of teachers, if they work in the academic side, they are academic intervention specialists, and those are the ones that are in our primary and elementary grade bands. They're pushing into those content sessions to support, and then they're hosting those AIM classes as well. And their main role is academics. reading small groups, math small groups, progress monitoring in those areas, and then tier three is doing the same thing. For our behavior intervention specialists, they will pop up in our GCA classes occasionally doing observations and things like that, as well as doing check-in, check-out sessions with students. And so they have a really good bond with families. And then we're all sort of obviously in communication all the time through Zoom and email just to update each other on students. But those student support team meetings, that's where that collaboration is really happening. And the parent is there, the guardian is there, the learning coach, and everyone's able to really give their feedback on a student and determine what's the best path forward. So it's really cool to see that behavior person come in and say, this is what we're noticing is happening when we observe them, and then the academic person to say, oh, this is the progress they're making. So
Mhm.
those are how those two kind of work together.
So a student gets both. There's always a behavioral interventionist with the academic interventionist. It's not just one or the other.
So sometimes it can be we serve a student just for academics, and sometimes it can be we serve a student just for behavior. A lot of our students receive both. We're super excited this year that we're able to use PBIS to make sure that students need that behavior intervention specialist before we put them into place. So we're seeing how students respond to that positive behavior reward system before we put that behavior intervention specialist in. But yeah, students can have both or one, or it's a really flexible model for sure.
Mhm. And what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you see with MTSS in this virtual model? And what are some big wins you've seen with this virtual
Yeah,
model?
the challenges are there, definitely. We always talk about brick and mortar and how different it looks from a brick and mortar. You know, like in a brick and mortar, you just like pull a few kids back to a kidney table, you send them back to, their class, and then you pull some more. And I feel like our team, because we're virtual, there's no longer the kidney table. It's like I'm popping into this class and then I'm in this class. And so while you're not moving like your physical body, you are doing a lot of work and you're monitoring a lot of students. And so I think that's one of the challenges is we want to fit in as many students as we possibly can, but sometimes it can be hard to manage jumping from class to class and trying to address all of those. And just as a supervisor, I realize that like we are constantly adjusting and constantly evolving to make it work for our tier one team of teachers, our tier two, making sure that these students are appropriately supportive. But on the flip side, there are things that work well. We have, I feel like our data management is just amazing. We have a progress monitoring workbook that has evolved over the years, and it's like this central hub for all the student data, and other departments can go and see how a student is doing. And so I feel like that is where it thrives in a virtual environment. We don't have like a ton of papers that are just like on someone's desk, and we're like, is this the right one? Is this the one you wanted to use? It is really a system of everything's in one spot, and we can link things, and we can make sure that anybody who needs information on a student can find it really, really quickly. So I think that's where we are really strong. Obviously, the obstacles are always going to be there, but our team is highly solution oriented.
What do you, I'm sorry, do you think their virtual or brick and mortar, they learn UCA's approach to MTSS?
So I love this, and I know that some people, when I say this, it might sound scary, but I think it's always so important for us to realize like we are in these families' homes. Like we're in their living rooms or we're at their kitchen tables. Like while we're doing school, someone could be, cooking eggs in the background. Like we are I feel like we do because of that virtual environment, because those families are so present in the learning environment, I feel like they become part of it. So they know they belong, and we are constantly in communication with them. And so I think that that's the thing that we get lost because a parent is not cooking eggs in the back of your classroom. Like you would have to invite them into that. So I think that that is something that you wouldn't think about as a virtual school. When you're working in brick and mortar, you're like, I don't want a parent just sitting in my classroom, but it could be highly impactful to make sure that they know they are part of that process and that system. And that's when we see MTSS thrive, is when the guardians, the teachers, the students, we're all at this table together and we're trying to make a solution together, on behalf of the student and with the student. So I think that that is the biggest thing. Our primary team is actually doing like their modeling interventions while the parent is sitting there, so that even when the computer is for the day, the parent can say, I think I want to try that thing you did in class. And that just helps that student grow even more. So we leverage that to our benefit and to the benefit of our students and our families for sure.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So that's a great reminder. So you're saying that these other schools, virtual, brick and mortar, what they need to remember is that despite being in a separate environment, like at the school, you need to remember that student homes, they have families, and they have things going on outside of school. And with I said, because our school is at their house, we remember that. We
Exactly.
like you said, you can the eggs on in the background or whatever, you can hear what's going on. And so that can come with its challenges too, but also this pro of remembering as we're providing support, these people are people in their homes. They have more going on than just school. That's a great reminder, Aimee. So, what do you think then GCA does particularly well when it comes to this MTSS, when it comes to this intervention and support? What would you say is like, man, this is where GCA really nails it, and other schools should do this?
Wow. I I feel like we have refined our process every year. It gets stronger. And I feel like one thing that we have really tried to do well is everybody has a lane in this process. So my team of instruction intervention specialists, they know their lane is to collect the data, to make sure the data tells a story about a student, and to make sure that it is communicating the correct story. So we want to make sure that what we are noticing with the student is showing up in the evidence. And then I think that it's so beautiful that my team can say, okay, I'm passing this off to a student support team now. And now they're in charge of getting everyone together and making sure that we're all at the table together and we're all making decisions. And then once those decisions are made, are they staying with us? Or are they moving to another department? And so I feel like that's something that we've continued to refine and we will continue to do. But I think that that is what is so helpful, is you're not putting a huge burden on one person or one team. You're making sure every team has a lane, and they're all in support of the student. But I think I will always advocate for making sure teachers don't feel a huge burden, knowing exactly what they need to be doing. And I think that's what we do at GCA very well, is say, this is your clear path, and when it's time to pass it off to another team, we will do that.
That's awesome. And that kind of is a good segue here for if you're mentioning like everybody's got a clear procedure, clear lane, everybody knows what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it. Is would you describe that as a system? Would you describe that as a routine? What tools, systems, routines do you think we have in place at GCA that other schools could adopt, or would you say should adopt?
Oh, I would say, yeah, it is definitely a system, and it has definitely taken time to build it out. I think what makes ours so impactful is, like I said, those data hubs, those wheels of everybody can see this one thing, and as people need it changed, it is all there in one place. Because, like I said about passing it off from team to team, what's so cool about it is every team can see our data hub, which is amazing. Because if they know, okay, this is not clear, or this is not going to help a student get the support that they need, we can all be in constant communication. So while I do love the lanes should not become silos, right? Like they should definitely stay as we're all merging towards this one goal. And so I think having a system where visibility and transparency, making sure that people can see what everyone is doing and how they are doing their jobs, so that we can make the best decision for our students.
Love that. And this could get you fired up here, but if someone were to be like, Aimee, you can't see a struggling student in a virtual school. It's impossible. They just are a number They're not in a classroom. You can't do it. MTSS can't really work. You can't see these struggling students in virtual school. What would you say to that person?
Uh, I I would say, come sit at the table. Like I think that that is like my my main thing with MTSS is it is true. It's so hard when you're just looking at a little floating head on the screen. But they're not just the floating head, right? They have a guardian, they have a learning coach, they have interest outside of school, they have other stakeholders who are constantly in communication with them. So I think that I would say get curious, call home, talk to a parent, really get context on a student, make sure that you've covered everything. Do you have a 360 view of this student and what they can achieve and what they can do? Because I feel like when you were saying that, I was like, oh, this is a person who is just like watching them in a classroom and is not really curious about what's happening around them. And I think that that's what our multi-tiered system of support does really well is we get curious about their behavior, we get curious about their academics, we get curious about who's at home with them and who can support them and how we can support them. So that would be my big takeaway there of get curious, ask questions,
Love
because
it.
it can totally happen in a virtual environment.
Get curious. Here we go. Leave us with this. What is the biggest lesson or a lesson that comes to mind that you've learned helping students through this MTSS process? Because it sounds like you have a ton of experience. You've done a bunch of different roles through MTSS. So you can tell me, like, just from any role you've had, what would you say is one of the biggest lessons you've learned about doing MTSS, supporting students in a virtual environment?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I I think the biggest thing I've learned is this is how school should be. Like this is what I wish every student could experience, even though it's just a portion of our students. And I say that because it is so targeted. It is so individualized. Our team and our teachers are talking and collaborating, and our coordinators and all of these other stakeholders are constantly in communication. And then I get to call a parent and say, here is what your student is getting in tier two, and here's what they're getting in tier three. And it's all personalized. And I feel like in that call alone, I'm like, hi, I'm delivering you a package, and we designed it for your student, and we're going to implement it for your student, and it belongs to them because every learner is different. And so that's just my biggest takeaway is that I want to carry this with me forever, that this is how education should be. Every student deserves this. And it even goes to like, if we want a better world, we need to make sure that our classrooms look like microcosms of society, of the society we want to see. So accepting differences, recognizing strengths, meeting people where they are and building from there. I don't want the multi-tiered system of support to get a bad rap for like, oh, if kids are getting support, that's a weakness. Like, no, that's a sign of a system responding to a need, which is what we should all do in this lovely, beautiful life that we've been given is respond to needs. And so every learner comes to our MTSS table with different needs, and that is okay, and it's on us to meet them where they are. So that's my big takeaway is this is how it should be. We should all be sitting at a table together, listening, seeing where we're coming from, and then building something together that is support.
Yeah, so good. Love that. Making sure that we support students, people where they are, where they need to help them get where they can without it. So here's today's big idea. When schools build systems that respond to students rather than wait for students to fail, every learner has a better chance to succeed. So thanks again to Aimee Purser for joining us and sharing her perspective. And if this episode gave you new ideas about student support and school-wide systems, be sure to subscribe and join us next time on GCA Unmuted, Voices of Virtual Education. Thanks, Aimee.
Awesome. Thank you.